Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into, well, a moment that could genuinely reshape the Middle East. Just picture it if you can. The UN headquarters in New York, always buzzing, right? But tomorrow, Friday, September 13th, 2025, that's set to be truly pivotal. The General Assembly is about to vote on something quite groundbreaking. We're calling it the New York Declaration. The full title, for the record, is the New York Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the Implementation of the Two-State Solution. Quite a mouthful.
It is, yes.
But here's the real kicker, the element that makes this declaration, well, different. It explicitly demands Hamas be removed from power in Gaza. So this isn't just, another diplomatic paper. It draws a very clear line. Our mission today is to guide you through this. We'll look at its history, what it actually proposes, and why, frankly, the whole world seems to be holding its breath. We'll try to unpack the diplomacy, the human stories tangled up in this, and the huge challenges distilled down for you, because the stakes, they couldn't be higher. You've still got hostages, families ripped apart, a whole region just desperate for some kind of stability.
What's really striking here is just how bold this is. The audacity, maybe. It's not just another resolution collecting dust. It feels like a real, determined attempt to revive the two-state idea, but crucially, with this very specific condition about Hamas.
Right.
It really could signal a new chapter in a story that's, well, dominated headlines for over 100 years now. And don't forget, this is happening in the General Assembly. All 193 countries get a vote, an equal say.
That carries weight.
Exactly. That collective voice gives this whole thing immense significance.
Okay, so to really get the gravity here, we need to understand how we even got to this point. This path is long and difficult. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, its roots go so deep, right, back to the early 20th century. Competing claims to the same land, cycle after cycle of violence, displacement, it's shaped generations.
It absolutely has. And, the modern conflict really ramps up after World War II and the Holocaust. The UN steps in, 1947, proposes partitioning what was then British Mandate Palestine, 2 states, 1 Jewish, 1 Arab.
But that didn't go smoothly.
Not at all. Israel declared independence in 48, the Arab states rejected the plan, and war broke out immediately. And since then, major wars in 67, 73. The Palestinian uprisings, the intifadas in the 80s and early 2000s, each one leaving deeper scars.
That of the two-state solution idea.
That really gained steam with the Oslo Accords in the mid-90s. The idea was to create the Palestinian Authority, the PA, to govern parts of the West Bank and Gaza.
But it stalled.
It stalled badly. Israeli settlements in the West Bank kept expanding. We're talking over 700,000 Israelis living there now.
700,000.
Yeah, which makes a viable, contiguous Palestinian state. Well, you can see the problem. Geographically very difficult. And then there's Gaza. Densely packed, under blockade since 2007. That's when Hamas took control.
Okay, and that brings us right to Hamas. As you said, their role is just central. You can't understand this declaration without understanding Hamas.
Absolutely critical. Hamas was founded back in 1987. It's designated a terrorist group by the U.S., the EU, Israel, quite a few others. Its original charter called for Israel's destruction. They revised that in 2017, shifted the focus more towards ending the occupation.
But their actions?
Their history includes launching thousands of rockets, suicide bombings, and then the immediate trigger for all this, the context for this declaration, is October 7th, 2023. Those attacks where militants stormed southern Israel, killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians, took over 250 hostages.
A devastating day.
Truly. And Israel's response in Gaza has also been devastating. UN reports cite over 40,000 Palestinian deaths, many women and children. Widespread destruction, a massive humanitarian crisis.
So this tragic backdrop, this raw history, combined with the immediate pain, that's what set the stage for the New York Declaration. It wasn't created in a vacuum, was it?
Not at all. It's a direct response, an urgent one.
So what is this document exactly, and who's driving it? You mentioned France and Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that's one of the most remarkable things. It came out of an international conference in New York, late July 2025, and co-authored by France and Saudi Arabia. Think about that pairing for a second.
An unlikely duo.
Very unlikely. It signals a kind of strategic pivot, maybe. Moving beyond traditional blocs, it gives it unique leverage, bridging Western and Arab positions. And that seems to have worked because it quickly got significant backing. The Arab League, that's 22 nations, plus 17 other UN members, key players like Egypt, Jordan, the UAE. The EU is also on board.
So broad support.
Very broad. And this builds on an earlier UN General Assembly vote back in December 2024. That one passed 157 to 7, and it actually authorized this July conference. So there's momentum.
Okay, given that collaboration, let's get into the nuts and bolts. What does the declaration actually say? What's the blueprint here?
It's pretty direct. It tackles the immediate crisis, but also lays out a longer-term vision. First, immediate demands. Hamas has to release all remaining hostages. The estimate is around 100 left as of now, September 2025.
Okay.
It also explicitly condemns the attacks committed by Hamas against civilians on the 7th of October.
That's significant wording.
Very significant. Israel has felt for almost 2 years now that UN bodies haven't condemned those attacks strongly enough, so including that specific language is key. Beyond that, it calls for ending the war in Gaza through collective action, and it pushes for a just, peaceful, and lasting settlement based crucially on the two-state model.
Right, the two-state model again.
Yes. And here's the core of it, the really novel part, dealing with Hamas in Gaza. It says, and I'm quoting loosely here, Hamas must end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority.
Hand over hand.
With international engagement and support, in line with the objective of a sovereign and independent Palestinian state. So the idea is the PA, Mahmoud Abbas's government based in Ramallah, takes over security and governance in Gaza, with international monitors helping out.
But the PA, they already govern in the West Bank, right?
Yeah.
But it's complicated.
Exactly. They govern about 3 million people there, but they don't have full control. Israeli security forces still operate widely. And then there's the deep rivalry with Hamas. Remember, they fought a brief civil war back in 2007. That split Palestinian governance.
Okay, so if the PA takes over, what about the immediate situation on the ground in Gaza? Security, aid.
Good question. That's where this proposed temporary international stabilization mission comes in. It would need to be authorized by the UN Security Council, its job, protect civilians, get aid delivered which is desperately needed, and help transfer responsibilities smoothly to the PA.
Sort of like peacekeepers.
Essentially, yes. Think about UN missions in places like Cyprus or Lebanon, something along those lines. And it would be vital for Gaza's 2.3 million people. So many are displaced, living in just dire conditions. Basic necessities are a struggle.
This all sounds incredibly ambitious, visionary even. But, as you said, the path is never smooth. What are the biggest roadblocks here? It feels like a minefield.
Oh, the hurdles are huge. You're right. First, the timing. It's strategic, but also tense. The vote is just days before this high-level UN summit, September 22nd, co-chaired by Riyadh and Paris.
And Macron pledged to recognize Palestine then.
That's the pledge, yes. French President Macron said he'd formally recognize the state of Palestine at that summit, adds pressure. Now, globally, 147 UN members already recognize Palestine. That's about 3/4 of the world.
But not the US or UK.
Correct. They and a few others argue it needs to come from direct negotiations between the parties. Then you have Israel's very firm opposition. Prime Minister Netanyahu was just at the Ma'al Adumim settlement, east of Jerusalem, a couple of days ago, September 11th. And he said quite clearly, we are going to fulfill our promise that there will be no Palestinian state.
Wow. Explicit.
Very. His government views Palestinian statehood, especially with Hamas potentially involved down the line, as a major security threat. And those settlements we mentioned, their continued expansion makes a contiguous Palestinian state physically harder and harder to imagine. It carves up the land.
What about the Palestinian leadership? Is the PA fully behind this plan? And are their voices even being properly heard right now?
That's another critical layer. President Abbas is 89 now, in power since 2005. He faces his own legitimacy issues. Plus, there was that concerning development in late August. U.S. authorities denied visas to Abbas and over 80 Palestinian officials for these UN events.
Really?
It seems linked to broader visa policies left over from the Trump administration. UN experts called for it to be reversed, warning it could silence Palestinian voices at this crucial time. Even though Palestine has observer status at the UN, Richard Gallen at the International Crisis Group, he made an interesting point about this. He said the fact the General Assembly is finally backing a text that directly condemns Hamas is significant.
How so?
Well, he suggested that while Israelis might see it as too little too late, it gives Palestinian supporters a way to counter accusations that they implicitly condone Hamas. It's like a shield against criticism, potentially helping unify international pressure.
Interesting perspective.
But the biggest obstacle, realistically, the UN Security Council. Any stabilization mission needs its approval, and the U.S. has veto power there. They've used it over 50 times on Palestine-related resolutions since 1972.
50 times.
Yeah. Plus, Israeli military operations are still ongoing, like in Rafah. Hamas, though weakened, hasn't agreed to disarm. And public opinion everywhere is just so polarized. Huge protests demanding ceasefires versus strong support in Israel for tough action.
Okay, let's step back from the high-level politics for a moment. What does this mean for you, for the ordinary people caught in the middle of all this? It's deeply personal for them.
Absolutely. We have to look at the human cost, but also the human hope. In Gaza, unemployment was over 45% before this latest war, reconstruction. Could cost $50 billion, the UN estimates. This declaration offers a sliver of hope for aid, for jobs. But think about the trauma. Over 40,000 Palestinians killed, many children. A child in Gaza may be displaced multiple times. For them, this isn't about geopolitics. It's about maybe, just maybe, getting a roof over their head, food, getting back to school safely. And in Israel, you have the families of the hostages. People like Noah Argamani, freed in that raid back in June 24. But others still waiting, agonizing. There's war fatigue setting in too. Protests from soldiers' families about long deployments. The economy's strained $70 billion on defense. 300,000 people evacuated from border areas.
Huge cost.
Huge. So for an Israeli farmer whose fields near Gaza are abandoned, living temporarily somewhere else, peace means going home, working their land without fear, seeing their kids grow up safe.
These are the real stakes, aren't they? A child in Gaza safe at school,
Yeah.
an Israeli farmer safe in their fields. This declaration feels like, well, a desperate hope for people on the ground, a fragile step toward the future many thought was impossible.
And there is potential if you look beyond the immediate conflict. A demilitarized Palestine, borders based on 67 lines with agreed land swaps, maybe Jerusalem as a shared capital. That could bring security for both. Economically, think about Gaza's offshore gas fields. Billions in reserves there. A stable Palestine could eventually export energy. The West Bank has its olive groves, but also a growing tech scene in Ramallah. There's potential.
And the Abraham Accords.
That's another piece. Those normalization deals between Israel and several Arab nations, they could expand. Saudi Arabia is the big prize, and they've tied normalization to progress on Palestinian statehood. So this could unlock wider regional shifts. And even on the ground, you see these glimmers. Groups like the Parent Circle Families Forum, bringing bereaved Israelis and Palestinians together. Interfaith dialogues in Jerusalem. Connection is still possible.
It really paints a picture of the scale of what's being attempted. So looking ahead, what happens after the vote tomorrow? What are the next steps?
Well, assuming it passes, that UN summit on September 22nd becomes even more critical. Co-chaired by Riyadh and Paris. Leaders from the UN, Arab League, the quartet, that's the US, EU, Russia, UN group, they're all expected. They'll likely reaffirm the declaration, start talking timelines.
And ceasefire talks.
That would be the immediate push. Urge immediate ceasefire talks, probably with Egypt and Qatar mediating again. They've done it before. And history, it does show UN votes can be catalysts. That 1947 partition plan, flawed as it was, led to Israel's creation. What's maybe different here is the language. This text tries to avoid the really divisive stuff from past resolutions, like that old Zionism is racism one from '74. It balances condemning Hamas with calls for Israeli restraint, trying to build a broader consensus.
So here we are, on the brink of this vote. The world is watching. Is this the turning point people desperately hope for, or just another difficult step on a very long road?
This vote, it isn't just about a piece of paper. It's really about that enduring search for peace in a place that's seen far, far too much conflict. It's a reminder, I think, that diplomacy, slow, messy, frustrating as it often is still our best tool. It's about trying to shape a different future, and that impacts real lives profoundly.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. If this New York Declaration does pass, and if that temporary international stabilization mission actually gets set up in Gaza, what kind of unexpected partnerships might we see? Think about different countries working together on the ground, rebuilding, securing a demilitarized Palestinian state. What new regional dynamics could emerge from that kind of cooperation? Something to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the New York Declaration.